Dr. Bongani Mabaso, I must say this is a big privilege for me. I mean, you are the first doctor that I'm interviewing. We have to just put it out there. Congratulations again on that achievement. I think it's a huge, huge achievement, especially for someone who is so talented, so smart. I mean, you studied engineering, computer and electrical, I think, at one of the, well-ranked, highly ranked universities in the country. So that is just amazing. But before we get to your journey thus far, I always like by just giving, the guests some time to tell us about who they are so we can get to know them a little bit better.
Thanks, Jawu. And I've heard of this little shindig you're running. I've been wondering when I'll be invited, but it's good to.
Well, you're here. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's good to finally land an invite. Yeah, look, I mean, I grew up in Malama, as you know. That's where my blood is. Family is still there.
Yeah.
That's where I find my meaning and grounding. So Bongani Mabaso. Come from quite a big family. We spread quite across that area, also in Soweto as well. So quite a widespread family, the Mabasos. So that's where I come from, and I went to school in. I think we met in I don't know if it's Shihlobo or Magangeni.
Oh, it's Magangeni.
Magangeni Primary School, yeah. So that's where I first met you. Yeah, this is like maybe more than 25 years ago.
Yeah.
This is when we were just young and just full of the joys of life.
Yeah.
So that's where I went to school. Then I went to Mount High School, mostly because my dad taught there.
Okay.
So he just told me, no, you're going there.
You didn't have a choice. You just follow.
No, he wanted to check me what I'm doing. Am I still studying?
Well, it worked out in the end.
It worked out in the end, man. It was a good time. So that's kind of where I come from. Limpopo is my home. So probably one of the biggest influences in my life is my father. Just the way that he is as a man, how he carries himself, respected in society. But also his father before him, right? So my grandfather. He was actually the first guy to drive a Mercedes in that whole area back in the late 80s. So I've got a lot of photos of that Mercedes. So it's a brand close to my heart.
I see.
It calls back to him because he was such an enterprising man. So he had businesses, he had a farm, all of that. And at that time, for a black man to do that was just not common, right? Which for me was a good lesson that you can actually be enterprising, right? And I see it in my father, and I see it in me, right? And it makes sense because there's a bit of a generation that I'm pulling from. So I think a lot of the challenges I think with young people in this day and age today is that there's not necessarily a lot of legacy of positive things to look forward to, right? Especially when it comes to being enterprising. And it can be very difficult to start something where you are now the godfather, right? Because you are the first. So just having a bit of legacy to call back on is very helpful in just setting you up. So that's maybe one of my fondest memory. The other one is my grandfather's brother. He was actually John Mabaso. He was the chairman of Orlando Pirates. So Orlando Pirates and Mabaso is synonymous. Like if you're part of my family, it's Orlando Pirates all the way. Here in Orlando. So
awesome.
he stayed right there next to the stadium. So we used to go there, get some gear, etc. So Pirates has also been a big part of my upbringing, right? So when they play.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome here. I'm also a Bucks fan, so you're at home. Yeah, awesome. I have to ask, the way you describe your grandfather and your father, and now yourself, the enterprising spirit that they have and that you believe you've inherited from them, is that inherent? Is it something that was created by the environment you grew up in, that you picked up learning along the way, or is it just in your natural makeup?
I think a lot of it is, I think God gives us talent, right? To each man as he sees fit. So there's definitely that we can't deny. But I think a lot of it, a large portion of it is just the upbringing, right? That the environment I was in, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to people that look like me and share a family name with me. That we're doing that. So I think that always sets a good example. One of the biggest I don't know if it's influencer. I guess influencer in my life is my father, in the sense that he was the one that actually pushed me to achieve more. You know, if there's one person in my life that always said, he believed that I would achieve the things that I have achieved before I did.
Wow.
You know, before even I believed them.
Yeah.
You know, so I think being in an environment like that, you know, sometimes can also be a negative thing where it's too overbearing. But fortunately, he wasn't, because there were enough examples to see that it can actually work out. So I think it's just the environment. That's what molded me.
Well, I remember your dad from school. I think he taught us history in primary school.
Yeah.
But if you can tell us more about him, because clearly he's had a huge impact in your life.
Yeah.
What is it about him that has helped shape you be the person that you are today?
Look, he's a very loud, larger than life character, if you've met him. So, you know, so I think just, you know, his attitude towards how he approaches things is what has helped me to have confidence. You know, because growing up, you know, funny enough, the thing I struggled with was confidence. And it wasn't because, you know, I didn't have it. It's just because I hadn't come to my own yet, right? I was still learning, growing, seeing from him, learning from him how he conducts himself in public and in other spaces. And I think it's just when you mature and you hit puberty, you get a little bit of confidence, you grow a little bit bigger, and your confidence starts to kick in. And you actually realize, actually, you've been confident all along.
Yeah.
You've just never, you know, had the chance to express it. You know, so when you know, when I finally realized, actually, I'm my father's child, I can be confident.
Yeah.
I can speak in public with no fear whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know, so I think I've learned a lot from him in terms of that, right? Just being positive in any situation, unafraid to stand up and speak and be counted, is what I would say I've learned the most from him.
That's awesome. I've always wondered, you know, children who have parents, be their teachers at school, how does the home life look like? Because, you know, they are together in class. So when you get home, what happens? Does he pull you up and say, you are not passing here, you need to do 1, 2, 3? How's that experience at home?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, it does happen, or it did happen. I remember I got 98 for maths. I think I was in grade 10.
Yeah.
And obviously they're in the same class staff room, and you know, they're talking like, your son only got 98, but the thing that he got wrong is so silly. Why did he get that wrong? And he would tell me those things at home, you know.
Yeah.
So that there was that. But funny enough, most of the time it was just normal father-son relationships. You know, you've got your ups and downs. I think a lot of that happened at school, and it stayed there.
Yeah.
Besides those, you know, few moments where, you know, he brings it back and gives you feedback. So that used to be annoy me a little bit. But besides that, it was just normal father-son, you know, type of thing. And my mother is there as well, right? I mean, she's been the other, you know, I guess, influence in my life, more from a calmer perspective, right? My mom is very, very caring, right? So, and nurturing. You know, when my father is the protector, goes out there, not afraid to be, you know, to stand up and be counted. My mom was nurturing us in the background, right? So there's no way I would be what I am, right, today without my mother either. You know, so I think at home, because of that, the motherly influence, that was quite diluted. So it made it actually very pleasant. So yeah, I must admit, I love my parents, and they're both still alive. So it's great to be able to honor them while they're alive. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's beautiful. For someone who's smart like you, I mean, coming out of university, there are many options you could have pursued in terms of studies. You chose to study, I think, computer and electrical engineering.
Yeah.
To what extent did your dad play a role in that direction? Or, you know, how early did you know that's the path you wanted to pursue?
I knew when I was 4. He said I must be a doctor. So, that was not going to work out. I was chatting to Palesa earlier that, you know, your parents just give you those options, doctor, lawyer, and something else. You know?
I think I was set up. They created an environment for me to want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Eventually I decided, okay, maybe this is not me. But
I feel like it's exactly the same way, right? So I just, when, you know, they would buy me these toy cars. I used to be into cars, you know, from very young, just because it was just part of the heritage in the family, right? We had this old bakkie called Barara. It's still in all our pictures. And every time he buys a bakkie, we call it Barara as well. Because it was an old Toyota. And it used to, like, you know, make that sound. So we called it barar. So I was curious how they worked. So I used to pick them apart. Every time you'd buy me a toy car, especially those ones that you control remotely, with the remote control, I would break it and then see how those motors work inside, and how does this work? Connect a battery, and so I knew I was curious about that. I just didn't know to what extent I would pursue that. So when we got a chance to actually start talking about what are we going to do, with our lives, what varsity are we going to go to? And actually, it was three friends of ours, me, Tleko actually, and another guy as well. That's unfortunately passed away. But we decided, engineering is probably the thing we want to do. And I knew at that moment I need to go back to those motors and understand how they work. So I chose electrical engineering. So I went to varsity. That was the thing I was going to do. But funny enough, within 1 week, electrical engineering had this Python programming course as well. But it was always seen as a substandard. At that time, Python was not popular like now, where Python, you think of machine learning. It was just like just a tool people use just to do quick calculations. It was a scripting language. And I knew there were other guys on the other side that were doing computer science. They were learning Java. And that sounded way more interesting to me. So funny enough, whatever reason, I don't know if it's just a call or whatever, but within 1 week I decided I don't want to do electrical engineering. I want to do electrical and computer engineering.
Yeah.
And I switched to the computer science class, and that just set me up. Like I thoroughly, maths and computer science and electronics as a third, but maths and computer science were by far my favorite subjects.
Yeah.
So I feel like I studied the right thing for me. Right? Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a beautiful gift for people to study something that they still feel fits within, their calling, so to speak, or their life journey. What was varsity like for you? The way you speak about studies, clearly you are someone who is very inclined towards that. Of course, you're a doctor as well. Yeah. What was varsity like for you? What memories do you recall from varsity that stand out?
Sure. There's a lot, eh? I think it's just a time of self-discovery, meeting people, learning new things. I think varsity was the time where I probably learned the most amount of new things in a short space of time. Not only academically, but personally, spiritually, and so forth, right? Like, because you're just exposed to so much, right? And also just so many diverse cultures from everywhere, right? So that's what I almost remember varsity like. It's just learning a lot of new things, having lots of new experiences that I hadn't had before. And I was fortunate enough to be in, around a group of people, strong mentors and people that could at least show you, how to navigate life within university. So I think that was, a big part of my varsity experience.
Yeah. Awesome. And of course, now you are a chief information officer at one of the big four banks. When you were still studying computer science and electrical engineering, did you ever think you would get to this level, at least at this age?
Yeah, I did. But it all goes back to, like, I've been told that all my life, right? Yeah. So I almost expected that. I think the short answer is I did. I did. I feel like, my calling is far beyond that, though. Like, it's about how do we make real impact in the world, right? Through some of the gifts that we've been given. I definitely believe that I would get there.
That's quite powerful, because most people would say, nah, I wasn't sure. It just took me by surprise. So it's quite interesting to hear you say, you saw it coming. And clearly your upbringing had a lot to do with that level of confidence and just charting a path that would set you up for success. So in terms of where you started in your career, leading up to the current role that you were in now, because, they are completely different roles. Yeah. Can you walk us through, call it your first job out of varsity?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. So my first job out of varsity was at Transnet Freight Rail, down here in Parktown. And I started, I think, I did my VAC work, the last part of the VAC work in December 2017.
Yeah.
And then I started in Feb 2018,
Yeah.
formally as an engineer in training.
Yeah.
Honestly, those were my formative years as an engineer, because I think oftentimes, you study things that are conceptual and theoretical, and you never get to apply them in a real space, right? In an industrial environment. And that was what Transit was for me, was a chance to apply what I've learned, all that theory, into a physical environment. Because for the first time, I wasn't just talking about a massive electrical machine or a control system. I was standing in front of it, and I had to diagnose it. I had to suggest changes to software, figure out why is the circuit not working.
Yeah.
And these are big machines. Locomotives aren't small things, right? These are 20-ton things. So just being in an environment where you have the space and opportunity to apply your trade was brilliant for me.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. I mean, look, it wasn't without its challenges. I think Transat at that time versus Transat now are very different sort of environments. I struggled a bit with language. There was a lot of Afrikaans at that time, different cultures and so forth. So it was very different to what I'd experienced at UCT, where it's more cosmopolitan. When I was at varsity, versus when I went to study there. But that just pushed me to work harder, know more, learn more. We worked with a lot of international OEMs. So they became almost my escape, right? Which is I could go and ask them directly and speak to them directly and learn a lot faster than perhaps if I just constrained myself to my immediate leaders.
Yeah.
So I just focused on that for a great number of years, and I believe that molded me into the engineer that I am today. So I still identify as an engineer. Like that's my everything else I've done, I've achieved, CIO and whatever the case is, that's secondary. Like I'm an engineer, right? And I kind of apply myself from that. Yeah.
A number of people will be interested to know. So, I mean, the engineering career is quite common, but not everyone really has the ins and outs of what it entails. Computer engineering, electrical engineering. When we hear electrical engineering, we think of ESCOM, most of us. But here you are working at Transnet. So if you had to break it down for us, what does an electrical computer engineer do?
Yeah. So I'll speak about what it meant for me, right? Because it's a wide field and discipline, as you can imagine. But for me, when I started, it meant a lot of testing and commissioning.
Okay.
So this is, writing requirement documents, understanding those requirements documents, and then sitting with international OEMs and getting them to try to build whatever it is that the company is looking for according to your specifications. So that's the first part, right? Is you need to understand what you're trying to build to meet your client's sort of requirements. Once you've procured those, because these are heavy machines, right? These are locomotives. They're very expensive. These are massive contracts that cost billions of rands. You don't just buy it like you go to a dealership and you buy a car. You go through an extensive period of commissioning, both at whichever factory it was built. So let's say it's built in China. You generally start there and you do some factory acceptance tests. When it arrives in the country, you do then some site acceptance testing. You do commissioning runs, and you go through literally every single possible scenario that you can think about that might go wrong. Or should go right, based on how you've written the specifications, and making sure that it meets every single one of them, right? So that was a big part of what I was doing. The fun part came in when things went wrong, right? Where the software, for example, didn't quite work the way you wanted it to work, or we bought. I remember the first project that I worked on was a 19E locomotive, and it was built in Japan, right? So the OEM was Toshiba, and they didn't understand how a certain aspect of our rail network worked, right? So the way they wrote the software was literally, it was just bad, right? And I literally had to sit down and write the logic code for them to go and implement and come back and test the next day. So a lot of that happened over a number of years until we got it right. Like I said, these weren't like 1 day or 2 day things. These are things that took you months, and sometimes up to 18 months while you're commissioning. And once you're done with that, you finally then sign the acceptance documents, And then you give a test procedure to the factory, to the guys at the factory, just to know how to quickly test it as they manufacture more. But now you start your production runs, and you can get them into production and start earning your money.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of what I did there, right? Just the testing and commissioning.
Yeah.
And then the diagnosis when something went wrong, either in the software or in the electrical circuits, etc., is what I did.
Yeah. So a lot of problem solving. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And I mean, in that space of time, you obviously rose to an executive level, I think, at Transnet.
Yeah.
What was that like? Were you expecting it? Were you working towards it? Did it take you by surprise? What did you do to get to that level?
So I think at that time I was not focused on career at all and building my career. I just wanted to be the best engineer I could be. Yeah. And I often advise young people of this, which is when you start off your career, focus on being the best version of whatever it is that whatever your trade is. Yeah. And the career will come later, because you can move around between companies and maybe chase the best salary, but that's actually not the best thing for you as a young engineer, right? The best thing you can do is just be deep in the work and figuring out what it is that you need to do. And with that, people start to take notice, right? That this guy actually knows what he's talking about. We can't actually move forward in this project without Bongani, right? So with that comes recognition, and that's where I got that those promotions. I think that probably the thing that changed for us is when we were challenged, when we moved to R&D in transit engineering. So there came a point in time where I decided the traffic to Joburg was just too much. So I moved to transit engineering, which was in Pretoria. Yeah. And I joined the R&D department. And we were tasked with building the first locomotive ever built in Africa by Africans, from the ground up, every single thing. So the software, the electronics, the mechanical structures, everything built by South African engineers, right? And of course, the things that we need to import, you import, like the engine. Yeah. And so I was tasked with heading the team that would write the control system, which is the heart of the locomotive, right? Which is the thing that actually controls every single function in the locomotive. Your braking, your acceleration, how much power goes into what, speed, all of that, and all the safety measures around all of that, right? I had to do that. I've never done that before in my life, so it's like, okay, it's real now. We're doing something that's bigger than me, right? It's a bigger than life type of project. And we pulled it off. I mean, we had a team of young engineers that I had, the fortunate position to be in, where I had to interview all of them. So we went around all the universities, giving away iPads, and then recruiting them into the organization. So we got really like great, young, bright, inexperienced people. Yeah. And you can imagine how much guidance I had to give off of that experience that I'd had testing and commissioning control systems, right? So that's kind of like my base, right? Is I'd been testing these things for 5 years, 6 years, whatever it was at that time, but now I had to build one, right? So switching from that mode of testing and commissioning to an R&D mode, we actually have to write software, build electronic circuits, and then build a control system was quite something. And we pulled it off, right? The Trans-Africa locomotive is now a thing that runs. Yeah. It's the first ever built in Africa. I was part of the team. Yeah. We had the president at that time, Jacob Zuma, come and congratulate us. So I had a chance to meet him at that time. And we got quite recognized in a lot of magazines and so forth, because the stuff that we had built was quite simply not been built before in the continent.
That's phenomenal. Congratulations on that. Yeah. That project you're describing sounds complex. It's huge. And you mentioned this was the first time you were faced with a project like this. Yeah. I'm curious to know, what was your mindset around how you approached this to tackle something completely new? Yeah. Of course, you had the previous background and experience in the testing environment, but now you had to build it. Yeah. I'm just curious, how did you approach a project like that? What were the specific things, thought patterns that you had to, engage to get you to execute that?
Yeah. Look, I think this is maybe part of the untapped potential that this country has, right? Yeah. Which is, if you give young people resources, the space and opportunity to do something, they will do it. Right? Like, that's the first thing. And I have to give props to the leadership there at that time, right? which allowed us to do that. Because they could have equally said, let's just get a tender out, let's get someone to build this thing for us. But we decided to do it inside because of the faith and belief we had in young, gifted people, right? And so I think that's a lesson for leaders, right? Is if you give young people the space and a vision to execute against, and they've got the skills to be able to do it, they will do it. The way I approached it was, like anything else, right? Which is, all right, freak out.
Yeah.
How am I going to do this? This is like I literally need to build something to an international standard. I still remember the IEC specification we had to build it towards. So yeah, it was quite daunting. So I was just reading up a lot, figuring out how we could do it. A lot of Googling, a lot of research, reading research papers, how other people approach this. And then just, almost like leaning into your experiences in the past, because it's quite amazing how this little thing that you've never thought about before is now useful. So I remember in UCT, we had this little course called was it MEM 301 or something like that? But some title, I can't remember the code, but it was MATLAB. I don't know if you remember this, and we had like this ring-bound textbook that just taught you MATLAB.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I know how to code in C++ and Java and everything else, but I just could not get this word MATLAB out because I knew MATLAB had this thing called Simulink. It was a control package, right? So I had an idea that maybe I could leverage that to not have to write code physically because that would take forever. Can I build a model that then can generate code and target some specific IC? So we then decided, okay, who knows how to do this? So we did some research, and again, it's amazing how you lean into your networks.
Yeah.
Met a guy called Grant. He runs a company. I think it's still only the only official MATLAB distributor in the country. We're like, Grant, when you want to do this, you are the official MATLAB distributor in the country.
Yeah.
Show us how to do it. Had some training. The guy showed us how to do it, and literally we built it up from there, right? In figuring out what to do. Then he had to come to the time where we had to pick the processor, right? Because we remember we're building everything from scratch. We're not buying anything, right? So what processor are we going to use to be the brains of the control system? Again, I remembered in second year, we did this course on processors and how they worked. And I remember the name ARM. ARM was like a popular thing, right?
Yeah.
Like ARM processors were the thing. So I'm like, okay, let me go to the ARM website.
Yeah.
Are there any controllers that I can pick that can help me with this task? And just through that process of research and elimination, you end up figuring out, this is exactly how I'm going to do it. This is going to be my development pipeline. This is going to be my hardware platform. This is how we're going to build the software. And over time, you build a testing rig to test the software. And over time, you figure out the requirements. You talk to all the senior engineers. You build your first thing. I think the first piece of software we built was to just control the locomotive compressor, just because we wanted to start with something that we knew was difficult to break before we went to traction and other things like that. And that worked. And then you go, all right, we built that one. That's amazing. High fives. Let's take the next module and build that. And eventually you're done. And you've got an experienced team that started from literally nothing. And through a process of research and elimination, you get to an answer. So yeah.
That's brilliant, man. That's brilliant. Did your promotion to executive level come after or before this big project?
It came in the middle of that. So once we had figured out how to do and what to do and how to do things, I had a chance to be promoted to now running the division that was building this. So now not only looking after software. So at that time I was the principal engineer for software design. So now looking after the testing and integration team, we had gotten a lot of experience for in the past. The energy team, the energy and traction team, the hardware development team, and so forth. So I got a chance to then have all these amazing teams under me, right? And then we could start to dream even bigger, right? Like, what can we do next? Yeah.
And when you took over that bigger role, were you not, scared around your ability to deliver and execute? Was there an imposter syndrome issue there?
Yeah.
Of course, your background maybe, had prepared you for that.
Yeah. Yes, I think I was definitely scared. I think I was the youngest exec at that time, or one of the youngest execs at that time in Transnet Engineering and probably in Transnet. So that comes with its own challenges, right? Are you good enough? Did you really earn this? And so on and so forth. So I think that was very challenging. And then the second thing as well was also leading a large team of people now, right? So you've had a small team, right? You could huddle together every day. Now all of a sudden you've got 50, 60, 70, 80 people reporting to you in some way, shape, or form. Was also challenging, right? So figuring out how do we create, now I'm starting to talk about culture, right? How do we create a great R&D culture? How do we get everyone engaged? My language is changing from, wow, before we were talking about, okay, let's pick this processor. Yeah, right? Like now it's like, okay, what culture should we be bringing? How do we train engineers? How do we get someone from varsity, right? To in 3 months, 6 months, a year, be the best R&D engineer they can be, right? So that's, my language started to change into that. But again, I think because the support structures around me and the experiences that I'd had were really great. So it really set me up to succeed in that as well. So it was a great experience. I mean, I look back at that very fondly.
Awesome. Some people struggle transitioning from a technical role to a leadership role. Because you're so good at the technical stuff. When you get to the leadership level, you're tempted to still continue on that route. You mentioned the support structure was awesome. What else helped you make that transition successfully from being a technical guy to a leader now?
Look, I think a lot of it, I'd seen it modeled by my father, right, and grandfather. So, so again, it's just going back to those experiences and going, what does it mean to be a leader? It means you show up, right? It means you speak up when things are difficult. It means you take care of people. So that was very helpful to be able to look back at that and go, I do have examples of leaders. So that was one. Two was very good mentors around me. I think that the leaders and the managers that I had around me also poured a lot into me, right? I mean, I can name quite a lot. I've been fortunate in having really great leaders that have, looked after me, given me advice, and made sure that I could grow, in the right direction. And then I think after a year or two, I also decided to go to business school and get a formal master's. I don't know. I just felt that would complete it, right? To say like I've really made the transition complete. So for me, going to the UCT Graduate School of Business was about just almost saying I have transitioned into leadership and I get it. And here's the proof, right? It was more that. I didn't really go there to learn leadership. I went there really just to almost get the stamp. So that's kind of what I did.
Awesome. When you reflect on your leadership journey from that time on, what would you say were some of the learning experiences? I mean, it was in some way a new adventure, getting into this leadership space. What were some of the key learnings that you recall? Maybe mistakes you made or achievements that you were able to, to produce?
So I think for any leader, especially when you lead highly technical teams, I think part of the challenge that, a lot of people face is, this lack of team engagement, right? Because now you are now dealing with executive pressure, expectations, and you are defending your budget and your purpose and why you exist and why you have so many people. Headcount and all of that becomes now, new language that you now need to deal with every single day. While the team is still talking about processes and what is the next algorithm we're going to deploy to make this a lot better, right? So that's just that team engagement is so important. And I think as a leader, one of the things I've definitely learned as a lesson is working on the team engagement side of things is very, very crucial to your success, right? Because without that, you can very easily be misaligned, right? You're selling this great vision of we're an amazing team, we're great, we're going to change the world, and the team is in a very different space to perhaps what you're selling at that time, right? And it's not like I was not there or whatever. It's just so easy to happen because you're literally operating at different realms, right? Where the team is and where you are, and so I think creating means of communication from every level and in every direction in an organization is probably one of the biggest, unlocks to productivity and innovation. Because if you can get someone that's way down, in the sort of hierarchy, telling you what's really going on, That's invaluable information, right? To get that type of feedback and to be able to make changes before they fester, those issues fester into something that you can't control, and all of a sudden you've got a mass of people leaving. So another lesson I would say is creating mechanisms and spaces that allow for communication at every direction and at every level. I'm not always comfortable to talk to you as my line manager, right? I want to talk to that guy. I'm not always comfortable asking this guy for whatever reason, right? I want to ask this guy. And if communication is only limited to your organizational hierarchy, you're dead in the water, right? You need to allow for that free communication. That's the only way you stay close to the ground and know how to pivot, know how to engage the team better, right, as you go on. So that feedback mechanism is very, very key, I would say, as people transition to leadership.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And when you look at your experience during that time and even up to now, how would you describe your leadership style?
I'll say visionary. I definitely slant more towards, defining a vision and explaining how we're going to get there, and then putting a plan together. So one of the things I truly, truly believe is there's enough dreamers today, right? Like there's no shortage of dreamers and people that can talk the right language without actually knowing what they're really saying, right? So people can say a lot of things, but what distinguishes you from everyone else is saying where you're going, right? So articulating a picture of the future that everyone wants to be a part of, but also putting a credible plan to go from right here today and what is that next step until I get to that point. That's often very, very hard because everyone can dream. Very few people know how to take things from where they are currently to that future. And I'm talking organizationally, culturally, budget-wise, strategy-wise, what things you should work on, what things you should not work on, the choices that you make. It's just very difficult to translate that strategy into reality. So one of the things that I pride myself in is being able to connect the current, right, the present into the future. And I think we don't necessarily have enough emphasis on that, right? You get promoted almost on the back of great visions and strategies that people have put together. But if you look at the execution track record, it's not that great. And I think great leaders ought to be able to blend those two things together, right, to be able to get you there.
That's spot on. And I have to get your insights here. Are there things that leaders can do to bridge that gap, build up execution capability instead of just talking the language? Are there specific things that can be done to upskill?
So I think there's a lot, and I think a lot of it we've already stated in this interview. My personal opinion is, and this comes from my experience in R&D, the only way you achieve anything as a leader is on the backs of great people, talented people, smart people that can help you to get to where you want to go. And so I think a skill that every leader needs to have is the ability to build great teams. Because if you can do that, right, you literally, it's in a sense multiplying yourself, right, and being able to achieve way more than you can on your own, or if you have a team that doesn't understand where it is that you're trying to take them. So I think that ability to build great teams, and when I say great teams, I don't just mean great on paper. I mean smart people that have done it before or have the potential to learn how to do it very quickly. I think finding those types of people and putting them together and giving them that great vision, is very crucial. Because oftentimes as a leader, and especially going into a new organization, right, you don't know what type of team you're going to inherit. That happens a lot. I experienced that as well in Standard Bank, right? I went into Standard Bank, I had no idea what team I was going to get. Right? And so, that can often hinder you, right? Because you can say the right things, put the right plans together, but if there's no one to help you to execute that, again, you're dead in the water, right? So that ability to build great teams, it's just a knack that every great leader that I'm aware of has, right? Is you surround yourself with people that are, that can help you in achieving your vision. So I would say that's a skill that's just paramount, and it's a bit of I suppose it's the opposite of the advice maybe you were looking for, because I guess I could say and talk about what you should do as a person, but I feel like you're not big enough as a person to be able to do it, right? The visions that often you paint are far bigger than yourself. And so you need to bring others along to be able to help you to get there.
Yeah. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Teams are critical, especially when you're leading at very high level, because now you are delivering using other people, through other people rather. So it is a big point. My observation is that sometimes some leaders may struggle with that because of inferiority complex.
Yeah.
They don't want to have people in their team who are better than them because it poses some threats.
Yeah.
What has been your experience in relation to that, and how leaders can get through that challenge?
Yeah. Yeah, look, and I guess it goes back to my advice earlier to any engineer or any young person that wants to really specialize in their field is take time to learn your field and really understand it. It's very difficult to be, or at least the chances that you'll be insecure about something that you have a lot of experience in, is far reduced versus someone that is, I call them helicopter leaders, right? So you've never been in this space before, and you've come in from the side, and now you're all of a sudden a leader. And it happens, and sometimes it works out great, but very often it doesn't, right? Because the leader has no appreciation for what the team is actually doing, right? And without that, that's where some of that insecurity comes in, right? Because I don't know what you're doing and what you're talking about. I'm insecure, so now I use other tactics, intimidation, threatening with timelines, this and that, promotions, you're not going to get it, and so forth.
Yeah.
You can end up in that trap, and often these are great people, man, that are like me and you, but I just somehow you've ended up in a situation where you either don't have the humility to say I don't know and you learn from your team, or you are hiding that and saying, what, because I don't have that experience, I'm gonna shadow it and just show you other things, intimidation and so forth, to hide the fact that I'm insecure. So that would remain my advice is, as a young person, get into your calling or your speciality. Really be a master of that, because that sets you up for later in life when you are now a leader. And again, it's not there for you to tell the team what you should do, right? That's also the other problem that may arise with very experienced leaders that have come through the ranks, is because they know how to do the job, they just keep telling the team how exactly you should do it, right? You also need enough humility to go, things change. People discover new things. I've got the fundamentals, but there's new ways of doing things, and I ought to listen to that and allow people to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. You mentioned your move to Standard Bank, where you are currently the Chief Information Officer. Tell us, what does a Chief Information Officer do?
Geez, I feel like a little bit of an imposter because so I'm the digital CIO.
Yeah.
So working in digital transformation. So the teams I lead are teams generally working in enabling, the externalization of APIs. So clients not, the bank embedding itself in you as a client, right? You want to make a payment, don't go to some portal, right? Just use whatever ERP system you're using, call an API, we'll make the payment at the back for you. Data and AI and so forth. So the spaces that I work in are maybe different to the traditional CIO role. So it's more like a digital officer type of role than it is a classical CIO role. But I guess a classical CIO role, you would make sure that you work with business, partner with business very well, understand what it is that the business is looking to enable for their clients, and then you support them with whatever technology, right? And so it means buying the relevant amount of systems to support that business ambition, supporting those systems, and just making sure that everything runs in a smooth way. So just the only slant in my role is to do that, but with a slant for transformation, right? So I see myself as somebody that's there to transform client experience. And we need to partner with business to figure out how we were going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because very often, right, in fact, not very often, the default interaction for most clients, even at a corporate, at a CIB, at a bank like that, is through digital channels, right? So very rarely are clients, for all these masses of transactions, calling someone to ask for that specific transaction, right? It's done automatically. So actually, I own the client experience. And I need to make sure that that's as great as possible and as simple for you and convenient for you to bank with Standard Bank than any of our competitors, right? That's essentially my role.
Awesome. And coming from Transnet at the time to Standard Bank, two different sectors, industries, however you want to dice it. And now you're taking on the CIO role, probably something you have not done in entirety. How did you get through the hurdle of, can I do this? Can I deliver? I'm ready for this challenge.
So the funny thing is, when Standard Bank gave me the call to go, we would like to consider you, right? So they called me.
Yeah.
So I didn't wake up and go, I want to go to work for Standard Bank.
Yeah.
So they called me and they said, look, we want you to come and work for us. We think you'd be a great fit for this role. At that time, because of all the stuff we had achieved at R&D, digital transformation was already synonymous with what I do, right? So anything with innovation, transformation, research was already kind of part of my brand. So they knew that, right? That's what I could do. And I remember when they asked me to send in my CV for consideration, I said, okay, great. Sent in a cover letter and I said, I do not have 10 years or whatever of experience in banking. So if you're looking for that person, this is not me, and don't hire me. But if you're looking for somebody to look at your problems with a completely different set of eyes, then you should consider me. And that's all I did. And then 4 interviews later, I was hired. So that's how it happened. So I think it was just leaning into my strengths, because it would have been very easy to go, I don't know banking. How do I approach this? Where, what are people going to say? What is this? And there's so many acronyms in banking. Where I think you can also approach it differently, where you go, actually, I do know systems. I've been building them. I've built one that's never been built before across the whole world. I've used things in the cloud. I've championed cloud in the organization that I work for in R&D. And the things that you're telling me you're looking for are exactly the same. So I think technology is a great enabler in that every single company, doesn't matter whether in insurance, you're in medical tech, you're in automotive industry, we are all leveraging and trying to use the same technology, right? And it turns out I'm already a master of that because I've been applying it and building it in a specific area. So I leaned into that strength to go, this is what I know, and this is what I have to offer. Here's what the environment can teach me, right? So being humble enough to learn the environment and understand how things work, and then marrying the two to become a successful, digital CIO. So that's what I did, and that's what I'm still doing. I'm still learning a lot. But I can tell you, we've made a lot of advances in all the areas that I had been previously working for before, because I was already very thoroughly well-versed in that, right? It was now just a matter of partnering with the right people. And I think this is maybe another point that people sometimes downplay when they switch careers, is there are people there that have been doing that for 10 years. Partner with them. You don't have to do it alone. And I've found great partners. And I must admit, that's been maybe the one really supremely positive thing about Standard Bank, is finding really great partners to work with to achieve something. Because you can always do things way faster together than alone, right? So now all of a sudden, this guy's got 10 years or 20 years or whatever in banking in the CIB space. I've got a PhD essentially in my field. And together we can literally achieve anything. And being able to find those partners and working with them is, for me, the best way to enter a new industry.
Awesome. As we draw to a close, I'm curious to know what led you to decide to do a PhD. You were already an engineer, well-studied, doing well in your career. What was the thing about PhD?
It's a tricky one, I guess. I think, firstly, maybe at an emotional level, it was just a sense of, again, capping it off, right? Like, I've done this stuff. I've been in this space. I just want to, get the, what did you call it? Get the
stamp.
Get the stamp. I like how you say that. Get the stamp. So it's been funny. My career and all the studies that I've done have been in parallel. I've never stopped working. And that's because I got the experience first, and then I did a master's. I got the experience first, and then I did a PhD. Where often it's the other way around. And that's okay, right? People are different. But I just found my postgraduate studies far more enriching because I had the experience. So when I talked about machine learning, I'd built machine learning models before. It wasn't like a new thing for me. It was just now thinking about that, in a research space and not with it as a hindrance. So I don't have to first learn how to code and do this and do that.
Yeah.
I could just focus on the research and do that.
Yeah.
So it's been a bit of a trend in my career. I'm not, I don't know if it's by chance or just, yeah, I guess it goes back to that advice of learn your trade first before you expand out. So because I did that, I just felt like, okay, I've earned my keep in this space, but what recognition do I want to have to go with it? And that's why I did a master's, and that's why I did a PhD. So that was the primary reason. The other reason as well was, I'm a very ambitious person, and I want to start businesses, that can use the smarts of young people to solve society's problems, right? And I felt being positioned as a doctor, that can work in a successful commercial venture, is perhaps a brand that I want to build that I haven't necessarily seen done before in the country. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. On that note, I have to ask, what is your next big chapter?
Probably my own venture. It's like those are, probably my own venture. I mean, like I said, looking at my grandfather, my father, it's probably going to go that way, whether I like it or not. So my own venture, but using all of who I am, right, and all the experiences that I have, to solve the next big thing. So yeah, I'm also excited to see what comes up next in this space. Lots of talks with a lot of my friends that are similarly minded in this space. So we're hoping to do something very soon.
Awesome, brilliant. Dr. Bongani Mabaso, thank you so much for giving me your time. I really enjoyed this interview. I think you've shared some profound stuff there. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Jabu. Appreciate you inviting me to your shindig.